A crimson wound tore across Hydra Prime's night sky, a dimensional rupture bleeding unnatural light across the darkness. Billions of Imperial citizens looked upward as something descended through that cosmic tear, trailing fire like a fallen star. Imperial Vox channels erupted with panicked transmissions. Orbital defense platforms locked their targeting arrays. The Planetary Defense Force mobilized with the practiced efficiency born from generations defending against Xenos raids. Governor Tallius stood on his palace balcony, magnoculars pressed to his eyes, tracking the anomaly as it decelerated. Not debris, not a natural phenomenon. The object changed course with clear purpose and intelligence. "My lord," his seneschal whispered urgently, "the astropaths report disturbances in the warp. Something breaches the barrier between realities." Tallius nodded grimly. "Alert the Astra Militarum garrison. Prepare evacuation protocols for the upper hive spires and—" He stopped. The figure had resolved in the sky before him, hovering impossibly without thrust or visible propulsion. A man, or something resembling one, broad-shouldered, clad in blue with a crimson cape billowing despite the absence of wind. Upon his chest, a stylized symbol that matched no imperial heraldry Tallius had ever witnessed. "Your world faces grave danger." The figure's voice carried impossibly across the distance without Vox amplification. "I am Kal-El. I've come to help." As if summoned by his words, the orbital auger arrays screamed warnings. A Xenos fleet had translated from the warp at the system's edge. Tyranids, the first tendrils of a hive fleet probing Imperial defenses. Within the governor's command bunker, tactical hololith displays flickered with incoming data. The Xenos vessels moved with terrible purpose. Bioships propelled by eldritch means beyond Imperial comprehension. Voidcraft swarmed from their carapaced hulls. Mycetic spores already burned through the atmosphere toward population centers. "Estimated civilian casualties?" Governor Tallius asked, his voice steady despite the horror unfolding. The senior tactician, a veteran of 3 Xenos campaigns, replied without emotion. "Conservative estimates place initial casualties at 30 million, my lord. The outer agricultural zones will be overrun within hours, the hive cities themselves within days unless the Navy establishes void superiority. And our mysterious visitor?" As if in answer, the tactical displays blurred with movement. Something impossibly fast intercepted the first wave of mycetic spores. The blue and red figure tore through their ranks like an avenging angel, each impact detonating the biological pods before they could deliver their lethal cargo to the surface. In the upper atmosphere, Kal-El worked with methodical precision. His eyes projected beams of intense heat that scoured alien vessels from existence. Where his fists connected with the larger spores, they detonated spectacularly, raining harmless organic debris rather than ravening hordes of genestealers, and Gaunt's Governor Tallius watched in silence as this mysterious being single-handedly accomplished what would have required an entire Imperial Navy battle group. When the last of the initial wave had been destroyed, the figure descended to the governor's palace, landing with impossible grace upon the marble flagstones. "Your world is temporarily safe," Kal-El said, his voice resonant with authority, yet tempered by something the governor rarely encountered in his decades of Imperial service: compassion. "But they will send more. I can help prepare your defenses." Tallius studied the being before him, humanoid yet clearly not human. Too perfect, too powerful. In the Imperium, such divergence from humanity inevitably spelled either alien deception or warp corruption. "What manner of being are you?" Tallius demanded, his hand resting upon his ceremonial bolt pistol. "Speak truthfully, for the Emperor's light reveals all falsehoods." "I am Kal-El, last son of Krypton. My world died long ago in another realm of existence. I was sent here through means I don't fully understand, but my purpose remains unchanged: to protect life, to stand against darkness." Before Tallius could respond, the palace trembled. Through the armored viewing ports, they witnessed the sky darkening again, not with night but with the vast shadow of a much larger bioship entering low orbit. This was no mere scouting force. The main Tyranid invasion had begun. "Emperor, protect us," the seneschal whispered. Kal-El looked to the governor. "I must go. Your people need me." "Wait," Tallius called as the being prepared to launch skyward. "The Imperium has protocols for such threats. The proper authorities must be notified. The Inquisition will want to interrogate you." A faint smile crossed those perfect features. There's no time for bureaucracy when lives are at stake. With that, he was gone, leaving only a rush of displaced air. On the tactical hololith, the operators tracked his impossible velocity as he intercepted the new wave of attackers. 3 days later, the main Tyranid assault had been broken. Imperial Navy reinforcements arrived to find the system's space lanes clear of Xenos vessels, the bioships reduced to drifting frozen husks. Upon the planet's surface, scattered broods of Tyranid organisms fought without cohesion, cut off from the guiding intelligence of their hive mind. Within the governor's palace, representatives from various imperial organizations had gathered, admirals from the Navy, commissars from the Astra Militarum, even a delegation from the Adeptus Mechanicus, drawn by reports of the strange being's capabilities. The creature demonstrates power beyond documented human potential, stated Magos Technicus Vile, his augmetic eyes whirring as they focused. Its velocity exceeds Warhawk pattern jet fighters. Its resilience surpasses even Astartes' physiology. It requires extensive study. Study? The naval commander scoffed. It should be commended. 3 hive ships destroyed. Millions of citizens saved. Whatever it is, it fights for humanity. That remains to be proven, came a new voice. The assembled officials turned to see a slender figure in the distinctive garb of the Inquisition. Inquisitor Cardinale Vran moved with predatory grace into the chamber, her face half hidden behind an ornate mask of gold and ceramite. Nothing stands higher than the Emperor, she continued, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Not in power, not in moral standing, not in the loyalty of imperial citizens. This being, whatever its origins, represents a grave theological threat. With respect, Inquisitor, Governor Tallius interjected, it saved my world when imperial forces could not arrive in time. It asked for nothing in return. It seems to embody the Emperor's own values of protection and sacrifice. Vrain's augmented eyes narrowed. Heresy begins with such seemingly innocent observations, Governor. The path to damnation is paved with rationalizations. The chamber fell silent as a figure descended through an open balcony. Kal-El stepped forward, his impossible perfection somehow emphasized rather than diminished by the dirt and Tyranid ichor staining his attire. I apologize for the interruption, he said, but there are still civilians trapped in the eastern agricultural zones. The xenoforms have established a central nesting ground. I've been clearing them district by district, but coordinated assistance would save more lives. Inquisitor Vrain stepped forward, her hand conspicuously near her bolt pistol. Identify yourself, Anomaly. By the authority of the God Emperor's Holy Inquisition, you will submit to examination and interrogation. Kal-El regarded her with calm eyes. I respect your authority, Inquisitor, but people are dying while we speak. I can hear their screams from here. Thousands of them. Children. Can your examination wait until they're safe? Nothing supersedes the security of mankind's soul, Vrain replied coldly. The physical deaths of a few thousand citizens mean nothing compared to the spiritual corruption one unexamined entity might spread. For the first time, something like anger flickered across Kal-El's features. Where I come from, every life matters. No authority is so important that it can ignore suffering. Then you reveal your alien nature, Vrain said with grim satisfaction. In the Imperium, sacrifice is our currency. The strong must be willing to expend the weak for mankind's greater survival. The Emperor himself sacrifices thousands daily to maintain the Astronomicon. Your philosophy isn't merely naive, alien. It's dangerous. Before Kal-El could respond, alarms blared throughout the palace. The tactical officer's voice came urgently through the Vox. Multiple warp signatures detected. Massive translation event in progress. The hololith display showed a new threat emerging. Not Tyranids this time, but the twisted shapes of Chaos warships. Their hulls distorted by millennia in the immaterium, bristling with corrupted weaponry. The Blood Disciples, Vrain whispered, recognition in her voice. The Tyranids were merely the prelude. This is a coordinated attack. Kal-El moved toward the balcony. I'll intercept them. Wait, Vrain commanded. These are not mindless Xenos. These are traitors to mankind corrupted by the ruinous powers. Their vessels carry Chaos Space Marines, warriors twisted by warp energies. They wield weapons that can harm even beings such as yourself. You know what I am? I know enough to recognize a potential catastrophe. If you truly wish to help humanity, You will coordinate with Imperial forces rather than acting unilaterally. For a moment, tension hung in the air. Then Kal-El nodded once. Tell me what I need to know. The briefing was brutally efficient. The Blood Disciples, a warband of Chaos Space Marines dedicated to Khorne, had likely been drawn to the system by the psychic reverberations of the hive mind's death throes. They would seek blood and skulls, targeting civilian populations for maximum slaughter. Their leader, Vorgath the Bloodbringer, wears Terminator armor infused with warp energies, Vrain explained. He carries an axe said to cut through reality itself. Do not underestimate him. Kal-El absorbed the information with grim determination. I've faced beings of immense power before, gods and monsters. Not like these, Vrain warned. The Chaos Gods are unlike anything from your realm. They feed on emotion, on belief. They can corrupt even the purest heart given time and vulnerability. For the first time, uncertainty crossed those perfect features. I've resisted mind control before. This is not mere mind control. This is the fundamental corruption of reality itself, the warping of physical laws and moral certainties. Even your incredible strength means nothing if your soul becomes a conduit for their influence. Aboard the lead Chaos vessel, Vorgath the Bloodbringer surveyed the tactical displays with hungry anticipation. His Terminator armor, adorned with the skulls of fallen Imperial champions, hissed and groaned with each movement. The planet's defenses are in disarray, reported his lieutenant, a twisted sorcerer whose armor writhed with embedded demonic entities. The Tyranid attack weakened their orbital capabilities. We face minimal resistance. Vorgath's laughter rumbled through his vox grill. Good. The blood god cares not from whence the blood flows, only that it flows abundantly. Prepare the landing craft. My lord, the sorcerer interjected. Our augurs detect an anomaly. Something moves between the vessels of our fleet. Something fast. Before Vorgath could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Warning runes flashed across corrupted control panels. External pict feeds showed a blur of blue and red tearing through their escort vessels, ripping armored hulls apart with bare hands. Impossible, the sorcerer whispered. No mortal could survive void exposure. No human could generate such force. Vorgath's eyes narrowed behind his skull-faced helmet. Not human, then. Something else. Something worthy of Khorne's attention. The bridge rocked again as their own vessel came under attack. Armored bulkheads designed to withstand. Capital ship weaponry crumpled like parchment as Kal-El tore his way into the command center. Chaos Marines opened. Their bolt rounds detonating harmlessly. Against his chest, Vorgath raised his axe, its edge keening with warp energies. What manner of creature are you that dares challenge the chosen of Khorne? Kal-El regarded the corrupted space marine, taking in the grotesque mutations, the symbols of slaughter adorning his armor. I am Kal-El of Krypton, and I won't allow you to harm the people of this world. With a roar that was half battle cry, half prayer to his dark god, Vorgath charged. His axe, Soulrender, sliced through the air where Kal-El had been standing a microsecond before. The Kryptonian moved with impossible speed, his fist connecting with the Chaos Lord's chest plate. Ceramite cracked. Internal systems failed. Vorgath staggered backward, genuinely shocked. No unaugmented being should possess such strength. But the surprise quickly gave way to savage joy. Here at last was a worthy opponent. Blood for the blood god, Vorgath intoned, raising his axe again. Skulls for the skull throne. This time when he swung, Kal-El caught the blade between his palms. For an instant they stood locked in contest, the Kryptonian's immovable strength against the chaos-infused weapon. Then, impossibly, the axe began to cut. A thin line of blood appeared on Kal-El's palm. Surprise registered on those perfect features. Pain, something he rarely experienced. The axe's edge, empowered by the ruinous powers, could harm even his Kryptonian physiology. Vorgath pressed his advantage, forcing the blade closer to Kal-El's face. Your blood will make a fine offering. Your skull, an honored trophy. With a burst of effort, Kal-El pushed back, his eyes flaring with heat. Twin beams of concentrated energy struck Vorgath's helmet, melting the ancient ceramite. The Chaos Lord roared in pain and rage, swinging his axe in wide, furious arcs. Across the bridge, the sorcerer began an incantation. Warp energies coalesced around his outstretched hands. Reality rippled as he sought to bind the Kryptonian with chains of pure Empyrean energy. Kal-El felt unnatural forces attempting to constrain him, not physical bonds, but something that clawed at his very essence. He broke free with a surge of effort, but the momentary distraction allowed Vorgath to strike again. The corrupted axe sliced across his chest. The legendary suit, which had withstood countless perils across multiple realities, tore under the warp-infused blade. Blood welled from the wound, startling in its vivid redness against the blue fabric. Realizing the danger, Kal-El changed tactics. Instead of meeting strength with strength, he utilized his speed, becoming a blur of motion too fast for even the enhanced senses of the Chaos Marines to track. In seconds, he had disarmed the bridge crew, shattered their weapons, and returned to face Vorgath. The Chaos Lord found his axe suddenly missing from his grasp. Kal-El held Soul Render, the corrupted weapon struggling in his grip as if alive and angry. "Your gods have no power over me," Kal-El declared, though the statement carried less certainty than it might have moments before. The wound on his chest throbbed with unnatural pain. The axe in his hand seemed to whisper promises of power, of glory. With visible effort, he snapped the weapon over his knee. The sound that followed was not the crack of breaking metal, but a scream of rage that echoed from nowhere and everywhere. The bridge lighting flickered. Blood began to weep from the eyes of mortal crew members. Vorgath laughed, the sound distorted through his damaged helmet. "Fool, you cannot destroy that which belongs to the blood god. You have only freed its essence." The broken pieces of the axe dissolved into crimson mist that swirled around the bridge. Where it touched bare flesh, it burned like acid. The Chaos Marines knelt in supplication as the mist coalesced into a towering, half-corporeal form. A demon of Khorne stood before them, its body a nightmare amalgamation of muscle, brass, and constantly flowing blood. Massive horns curved from its bestial head. In its clawed hands it held an axe that dwarfed the one Kal-El had destroyed. "Blood," it demanded, its voice causing mortal ears to bleed. "Skulls!" Kal-El stood his ground as the monstrous entity focused its hatred upon him. "I've faced demons before," he said, though doubt crept into his voice. This creature was fundamentally different from the extra-dimensional entities he had encountered in his home reality. It radiated not just malevolence, but wrongness and affront to natural law. The demon swung its massive axe. Kal-El dodged, countering with a punch that would have shattered mountains. His fist connected with the demon's chest, displacing its form momentarily before it reconstituted. "Your strength feeds Khorne," the demon roared with pleasure rather than pain. "Your rage empowers him." Kal-El realized with growing horror that his conventional tactics were ineffective. This was not a physical enemy that could be overpowered. This was a manifestation of an idea, a concept given form through the corrupted physics of the warp. The demon pressed its attack, each swing of its axe tearing not just through air, but through the fabric of reality itself. Kal-El evaded most blows, but those that connected sent waves of unnatural pain through his body. This wasn't just physical damage, but something deeper, an assault on his very essence. As he fought, Kal-El became aware of a disturbing sensation, a whisper in his mind growing louder with each exchange of blows. The voice promised power beyond his imagining, if only he would embrace the path of Khorne. After all, did he not fight for justice? Was Khorne not the god of martial honor as well as slaughter? Kal-El faltered, the insidious logic working its way through his consciousness. In this moment of weakness, the demon's axe caught him squarely in the chest, sending him crashing through multiple bulkheads. The Kryptonian lay amid the wreckage, blood flowing freely from wounds that should have been impossible to inflict. The demon approached, its massive form barely fitting through the breached bulkheads. "Yield," it commanded. "Serve." Something cold and terrible whispered in Kal-El's mind that perhaps this was where he belonged. This universe was harsh, brutal. Perhaps the conventional morality he had always followed was insufficient here. Perhaps power and domination were the only truths that mattered. The symbol on his chest caught his fading gaze. Hope. That was what it had meant on Krypton. Not an S for Superman as humans had mistakenly believed, but the Kryptonian symbol for hope. With tremendous effort, Kal rose to his feet. "No," he said simply. "I reject your god and everything he stands for." The demon roared in frustration, raising its axe for a killing blow. But before it could strike, a new sound filled the corrupted vessel, a song pure and terrible that caused the demon to shriek in pain. Sisters of Battle had boarded the vessel, their hymns to the Emperor cutting through the warp corruption like cleansing fire. Behind them came Inquisitor Vrain, wielding a staff topped with a golden aquila that blazed with blinding light. "Creature of the warp," she intoned. "By the Emperor's light I banish thee." The demon's form wavered, its substance pulled between reality and the immaterium. It fought against the banishment, focusing its hatred on the Inquisitor. Kal-El saw his opportunity. Summoning his remaining strength, he launched himself at the distracted demon. Instead of attacking with brute force, he grasped the demon's substance and flew, accelerating to speeds that caused the air around them to ionize, up through the breached hull of the ship, into the void of space. Further still, pushing his powers to their limit, Kal-El carried the struggling demon beyond the system's gravity well, beyond the reach of its worshippers' bloody devotion. In the cold emptiness between stars, the demon's form began to unravel. Without the sustaining belief and emotion of mortal minds, it thrashed and howled soundlessly in the vacuum, its substance returning to the immaterium. As the last of it dissolved, Kal-El felt the whispers in his mind fade. But the wounds remained, bleeding sluggishly in the vacuum where they should have already begun to heal. The corrupting influence of the warp had affected him more deeply than he realized. With the last of his strength, he turned back toward Hydra Prime, a barely conscious missile falling through void and atmosphere. In the medikey chamber of an Imperial cruiser, Kal-El awoke to the sound of chanting. Tech priests moved around his bed, monitoring arcane devices attached to his body. Servitors pumped unidentifiable fluids into his veins through crude metal needles that somehow penetrated his normally invulnerable skin. "The corruption spreads slowly," observed a tech priest, his voice devoid of emotion, "but it spreads nonetheless." Inquisitor Vrain stood at the foot of the bed, her masked face unreadable. "You cannot remain here, Kal-El of Krypton. Your presence destabilizes the careful theological balance of the Imperium." Despite his weakened state, Kal-El managed to sit up, disconnecting several monitoring devices in the process. "I saved your world. I fought your enemies. And in doing so, you demonstrated power that rivals that of the Emperor himself," Vrain replied coldly. "Power without proper sanctioning or theological context. The masses already whisper of you as a savior. Do you understand how dangerous that is? Faith is the foundation upon which the Imperium stands. Faith in the Emperor, unquestioned and absolute. Where I come from, people are allowed to choose what they believe." "Then where you come from is doomed," Vrain stated flatly. "In this galaxy, unity of purpose is all that stands between humanity and extinction. One faith, one ruler. Anything else invites disaster." Governor Talius entered the chamber, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Inquisitor, the High Lords have reached a decision regarding our visitor." Vrain turned, surprise evident in her posture if not her hidden face. "So quickly? Without proper examination or interrogation?" "The situation is unprecedented," Talius replied, as is the response. "The being known as Kal-El is to be transported to Terra immediately. The Emperor himself will judge his purpose." Shock rippled through the chamber. The Emperor, entombed upon the Golden Throne for 10,000 years, communicated only rarely and cryptically through the tarot and visions granted to his most devoted servants. Direct judgment was almost unheard of. "Impossible," Vrain whispered. "The journey alone would take months. The corruption within him would spread." "Special dispensation has been granted," Talius continued. "A warp jump directly to the Sol system, with Grey Knight's escort to contain any corruption during transit." Kal-El looked between them, understanding little of the implications but grasping the gravity of the situation. "This Emperor, he leads your Imperium?" The question was met with horrified silence. "The Emperor is mankind," Vrain finally replied. "He is our past and our future, our protection against the darkness of the void and the horrors of the warp. 10,000 years ago, he sacrificed his mortal form to continue his protection of humanity. He died. His physical body was mortally wounded by his traitorous son," Talius explained carefully. "But his divine consciousness remains active, bound to the Golden Throne which sustains what remains of his corporeal form. From there he projects the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that makes warp travel possible. Without it, humanity would be isolated, divided, doomed." Kal-El absorbed this information with growing concern. "And this Emperor wants to see me?" "Not see," Vrain corrected. "Judge." There is a difference. The journey to Terra was conducted under conditions of maximum security. The vessel, a specialized craft of the Inquisition, cut through the warp with unnatural speed. Grey Knights, space marines specialized in combating demonic threats, stood constant vigil over Kal-El's chamber. Through the small viewing port in his quarters, Kal-El watched the impossible geometries of the warp pass by. The psychic maelstrom affected him differently than it did the human crew. Where they required Geller fields and constant prayer to maintain their sanity, he experienced the immaterium as a dimensional overlay, similar to, but far more chaotic than, the phantom zone he had encountered in his home reality. The corruption from his wounds continued to spread, a network of black veins extending outward from the gashes left by the demon's axe. The ship's apothecaries and tech priests worked constantly to slow its progress, but they had never encountered Kryptonian physiology before. On the 7th day of transit, Kal-El was visited by the Grey Knight's chaplain, a towering figure in ornate power armor whose face remained hidden behind a skull-shaped helmet. "Your corruption progresses," the chaplain observed, his voice resonating with psychic undertones, "yet you resist its influence more effectively than any mortal I have witnessed." Kal-El winced as a tech priest applied a poultice of consecrated herbs to his wound. "In my world, I've been exposed to many forms of corruption. Mind control, parasitic entities, poisons designed specifically to affect my biology. This is different. The touch of chaos is not merely physical or mental," the chaplain stated. "It is spiritual. It corrupts the very essence of what you are. And what am I, in your understanding?" The chaplain was silent for a long moment. "That is not for me to determine. Only the Emperor may judge your true nature. But I observe that you possess power comparable to the primarchs of old, yet lack their warp-infused origins. You display moral conviction that would shame many Imperial saints, yet follow no recognizable Imperial creed. You are an impossibility, a contradiction. Where I come from, I'm not the only one with powers," Kal-El explained. "There are others. Some use their abilities to help people, some for selfish gain, some for destruction. And who judged which path was correct?" The question gave Kal-El pause. "I suppose each of us did individually, based on our own moral compass. And therein lies the fundamental flaw of your reality," the chaplain said. "Morality cannot be left to individual interpretation in a universe where gods of excess, slaughter, disease, and false hope actively corrupt the minds of mortals. The Emperor's vision provides the only safe path through such peril." Before Kal-El could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The tech priests hurriedly completed their ministrations and departed. The chaplain tilted his head, receiving information through his armor's communication systems. "We are under attack," he stated calmly. "A fleet of unknown origin has intercepted us despite the secrecy of our route." Kal-El rose from his bed, ignoring the pain radiating from his wounds. "Let me help." "You are in no condition to fight," the chaplain observed, "and you remain under our custody until presented to the Emperor." "People are dying while we speak," Kal-El countered. "I can hear them. Let me help, or confine me more effectively." The chaplain considered for a moment, then nodded once. "Follow me. But know that any attempt to flee will be considered confirmation of hostile intent." On the bridge, a scene of controlled chaos greeted them. Tactical hololiths displayed their vessels surrounded by ships of unknown configuration, neither imperial nor matching any known Xenos patterns. They attacked with weapons that seemed to phase in and out of reality, bypassing conventional defenses. "Status report," the chaplain demanded. The ship's captain responded without taking his eyes from the tactical displays. "Void shields at 30% and failing. Weapons ineffective against their phase-shifting technology. 3 boarding craft have attached to lower decks. Grey Knight Squad Purgator is engaging." Kal-El studied the hololith images with growing dread. "I recognize those ships. Kryptonian design, but corrupted somehow. Twisted." All eyes turned to him. "Explain," Inquisitor Vrayan demanded, stepping forward from the shadows. "Krypton was destroyed. I was sent away as an infant, the last survivor. But before that, there were colonies, outposts, exploration vessels." Kal-El's expression grew troubled. "If some of them found their way to this reality as I did, but arrived centuries or millennia earlier, they could have established a presence unknown to the Imperium," Vrayan concluded. or deliberately hidden. Further discussion was cut short as the bridge rocked violently. Warning runes flashed across control panels. Lower decks breached, reported a senior officer. Grey Knights in combat with boarding parties. Enemy combatants reported as humanoid but heavily augmented. They're heading for the prisoners' quarters. They're looking for me, Kal-El realized. Another violent shudder ran through the ship. The lighting flickered and died, replaced by the red glow of emergency lumens. When it stabilized, a new figure stood on the bridge, having somehow bypassed all security. The intruder resembled Kal-El in broad physical structure, but was twisted by extensive cybernetic augmentation. Where the Man of Steel's appearance was one of natural perfection, this being was a grotesque marriage of Kryptonian biology and machine. Its skin had the same invulnerable quality but was traced with metallic components that pulsed with energy. The symbol on its chest was a perverted version of Kal-El's own, the lines harsh and angular. Kal-El, the creature spoke, its voice a harmonic blend of organic and synthetic tones. Last son of Krypton, we have searched for you across realities. Grey Knights and ship security surrounded the intruder, weapons trained. The chaplain stepped forward, his force sword humming with psychic energy. Identify yourself, abomination, he demanded. By what right do you attack a vessel of the Holy Inquisition? The creature's gaze never left Kal-El. I am Con-El, once of the House of El, now of the Collectorate. We have come to integrate the last pure Kryptonian genetic template. The House of El? Kal-El's expression showed shock and confusion. That's impossible. Krypton was destroyed. The bloodlines ended. In your reality, perhaps, Con-El replied. In ours, a fragment survived, adapted, evolved. We discovered the principle of dimensional transit millennia ago. We have built an empire spanning multiple realities. This one, with its unstable dimensional barriers and rich resources, is merely the latest targeted for integration. Inquisitor Vrayan stepped forward. No empire exists in imperial space without our knowledge. The Emperor's dominion is absolute. For the first time, Con-El acknowledged the humans around him. His augmented eyes scanned Vrayan with clinical detachment. Your Emperor is known to us, he stated. A powerful psychic entity, but ultimately just another consciousness to be integrated into the Collectorate. His knowledge will serve our expansion. His genetic material will enhance our biological components. The blasphemy caused audible gasps among the crew. The Grey Knights moved as one, attacking the intruder with coordinated precision. Force weapons designed to harm demons struck the cybernetic Kryptonian from multiple angles. Con-El moved with inhuman speed, though lacking Kal-El's fluid grace. His movements were efficient, calculated, machine-like. Force weapons that could cleave through demonic entities merely scraped against his hybridized flesh, where they connected with cybernetic components. Sparks flew and systems momentarily faltered, but self-repair protocols engaged almost instantly. Inefficient, Con-El observed, catching a force halberd mid-swing and shattering its adamantium haft. Your weapons are designed for entities of warp energy. I am material, evolved, perfected. With methodical precision, he disabled the Grey Knights one by one, not killing them, Kal-El noted, but rendering them combat ineffective with precisely calculated force. Despite his weakened condition, Kal-El launched himself at his corrupted kinsman. Their collision shook the bridge, consoles shattering under the force of their impact. Where the Grey Knights had failed, Kal-El matched Con-El blow for blow. You're holding back, Con-El observed as they grappled. Limiting your force to avoid collateral damage to these humans. Inefficient. Irrational. It's called compassion, Kal-El grunted, straining against the cybernetic strength. Something our house once valued above all else. Con-El's expression remained impassive. Compassion is evolutionary baggage. We integrated its useful components, discarded the rest. The Collectorate values optimization above sentiment. They broke apart, circling each other amid the wrecked bridge. The ship's crew and surviving Grey Knights had established a perimeter, weapons trained on both Kryptonians, unable to distinguish friend from foe at the speeds they moved. Your wounds extend beyond the physical, Con-El noted, scanning Kal-El with augmented vision. Chaos corruption. Fascinating. We have encountered similar phenomena in other dimensions. It can be contained, studied, utilized. Nothing about chaos should be utilized, Kal-El responded, feeling the corruption pulse within his wounds as if responding to its mention. It's pure evil. Evil is a subjective moral construct. The Collectorate recognizes only utility or lack thereof. Connell's head tilted slightly. The corruption can be removed. Your genetic template purified. Join us willingly, and your transition will be optimized for comfort. And if I refuse, then integration will proceed regardless but with suboptimal parameters for your consciousness retention. The Collectorate requires your uncorrupted genetic sequence to correct drift in our population. Your consent is preferred but not necessary. Before Kal-El could respond, a new presence made itself known on the bridge. The chaplain, who had been incapacitated earlier, rose to his feet. But something was different. His movements had a fluid grace that belied his massive armor. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that resonated through the ship's structure itself. "Enough," he said, and the single word contained power that caused both Kryptonians to turn toward him. "The Emperor has marked this one for judgment. None shall interfere." The chaplain's eyes blazed with golden light through the lenses of his skull helmet. Psychic energy coruscated around his armor, forming the ghostly outline of a much larger, more magnificent figure. Connell analyzed this new development with evident caution. Possession by a warp entity. Potentially the consciousness designating itself the Emperor. Threat assessment significant. The possessed chaplain raised a hand wreathed in golden fire. "You trespass not merely in Imperial space, abomination, but upon the Emperor's direct attention. Begone!" A wave of pure psychic force erupted from the chaplain's outstretched hand. Connell's cybernetic system sparked and failed as the energy washed over him. For the first time, his composed features showed something approaching concern. "Unanticipated psychic capability," he stated, his voice distorting as systems attempted to compensate. "Tactical withdrawal advised." With blinding speed, Connell retreated from the bridge, smashing through bulkheads toward his boarding craft. The golden light faded from the chaplain's eyes and he collapsed to his knees, steam rising from his overheated armor joints. "The Emperor protects," he whispered before losing consciousness. Inquisitor Vrain stared at the fallen space marine with naked awe. "A miracle. Direct intervention. I have never witnessed such a thing in all my years of service." Tactical officers reported that the attacking vessels were retreating, breaking off engagement and disappearing into dimensional rifts rather than conventional warp transit. The immediate danger had passed, but the implications remained. "They will return," Kal-El said with certainty. "The Collectorate doesn't abandon objectives. If they're anything like the Krypton I knew, they're methodical, persistent." Fran turned to him, her earlier hostility somewhat tempered. "Then it becomes even more imperative that you reach Terra. The Emperor has demonstrated his interest in your fate. Such direct intervention has not been recorded in centuries." The remainder of the journey proceeded without incident, though tension hung heavy throughout the vessel. The wounded were tended to. The dead were given proper rites. Kal-El spent the time in meditation, focusing his will on containing the chaos corruption. The wound no longer bled, but the black veins extending from it pulsed with malevolent energy, occasionally causing him to experience visions of slaughter and destruction that grew increasingly difficult to distinguish from his own thoughts. As they approached the Sol system, he was permitted to view Terra through the ship's ocular arrays. The birthplace of humanity was nothing like the Earth he had known. Where his adopted homeworld had been a blue jewel suspended in the void, this Terra was a scarred, industrialized orb surrounded by a breathtaking web of orbital structures, defense platforms, and void ships. At the center stood the Imperial Palace, a continent-spanning edifice of impossible grandeur, its highest spires reaching into low orbit. Even from space, the psychic presence emanating from it was palpable to Kal-El's enhanced senses. A golden light that penetrated the very fabric of reality. Their vessel docked at an orbital station reserved for inquisitorial craft. From there, a heavily guarded transport carried Kal-El, Inquisitor Vrain, and a contingent of Grey Knights to the surface. They descended through layers of security until, finally reaching the outer precincts of the Imperial Palace itself. What followed was a procession through corridors of overwhelming majesty. Miles of processionals lined with statues of space marines hundreds of feet tall. Cathedrals where thousands of pilgrims prostrated themselves before relics of Imperial saints. Battlements where Titan war machines stood eternal vigil. At each checkpoint, Vrain presented credentials of increasing rarity and significance. Ancient scripts were consulted. Genetic samples were taken and verified. Psychic probes assessed their intentions. Finally, they reached a vast adamantium door inscribed with symbols that hurt the eye to look upon directly. Before it stood members of the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guard, their golden armor gleaming with an inner light. "The anomaly will proceed alone from here," stated the shield captain, his voice brooking no argument. Vrain stepped forward. "With respect, shield captain, the prisoner represents a potential threat of the highest order. The protocols clearly state..." "The protocols are superseded by direct command," the custodes interrupted. "He will proceed alone, or he will not proceed at all." Even the Grey Knight stood in obvious deference to the golden-armored guardians. Kal-El looked to Vrain, who finally nodded once. "The Emperor protects," she said simply. The massive door swung open with impossible silence. Beyond lay a corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity, lined with more custodes standing immobile as statues, their guardian spears held at perfect attention. Taking a deep breath, Kal-El stepped forward alone. The corridor extended for what seemed like miles, though distance became difficult to judge as reality itself seemed to warp subtly around him. The air grew heavy with psychic presence pressing against his consciousness like the deepest ocean depths. Finally, the corridor opened into a chamber of such vast proportions that its boundaries were lost in shadow and distance. At its center stood the Golden Throne, a massive construct of technology and psychic architecture beyond comprehension. Upon it sat what remained of the Emperor of mankind. His physical form was withered to a desiccated husk after 10 millennia of unimaginable sacrifice. Yet he radiated power that made Kal-El's unprecedented strength seem insignificant by comparison. Ranged around the throne were ranks of custodes, along with tech priests tending to the life support systems that sustained the Emperor's physical form. Silent sisters stood at strategic positions, their null presence creating pockets of psychic emptiness in the overwhelming sea of the Emperor's power. As Kal-El approached, guided by instinct he could not name, he felt the weight of the Emperor's attention focus upon him. No words were spoken, yet communication occurred, bypassing language entirely to impress concepts directly upon his consciousness. "Last son of Krypton, guardian of a dead reality, I have watched your coming with great interest." Kal-El found himself unable to speak aloud, but his thoughts formed a response the Emperor perceived. "You know what I am? I know all that walks within the materium and much that lurks beyond. Your arrival was foreseen, though its meaning remained unclear until now." Images flashed through Kal-El's mind. The destruction of Krypton, his arrival on Earth, his life as both Clark Kent and Superman, his battles against forces that threatened his adopted homeworld, but also new visions, things he had never experienced, alternative paths his life might have taken, darker possibilities where his power had corrupted rather than protected. Why am I here? In this reality this time? Causality is rarely simple, Kal-El. Perhaps you were drawn here by the same forces that guide all things. Perhaps your presence serves a purpose in the great game against the ruinous powers. Perhaps it is mere chance, though I have come to doubt the existence of such a thing. The Emperor's psychic voice carried unfathomable weariness beneath its power, the exhaustion of a being who had guided humanity through 10,000 years of constant siege, unbidden. The question formed in Kal-El's mind. "Are you truly a god?" The Emperor's response carried something that might have been amusement. "I am what humanity needed me to become. Once a man, now something more and something less. Godhood is a matter of perspective. In your reality, were you not worshipped by some, though you denied divinity?" The comparison struck uncomfortably close. Kal-El had always rejected any cult of personality around Superman, insisting he was merely using his abilities to help others. Yet he could not deny that some had viewed him with religious awe. "I never wanted worship, only to help, and therein lies the paradox that has brought you to my attention. Your power rivals that of my primarchs, yet you lack their warp-touched nature. Your moral certainty resembles that of my greatest saints, yet you follow no imperial creed. You are an impossibility in a universe that cannot afford such contradictions." Kal-El felt the corruption in his wounds pulse in response to the Emperor's scrutiny. The black veins had spread further, now reaching toward his heart. Soon they would corrupt his mind, turning his incorruptible moral compass toward chaos. "You are wounded by forces you do not comprehend. Last son, The ruinous powers seek to claim you as they seek to claim all beings of consequence. They would remake you into their champion, a corruption of all you stand for. Can you heal me? I can, but there would be a cost. There is always a cost. The Emperor's presence deepened, focusing more intently upon him. Kal-El felt as if his very soul were being examined. Every moment of his existence laid bare for judgment. You stand at a crossroads, Kal-El. I offer you 3 paths. Images formed in Kal-El's mind, so vivid they seemed more real than the chamber around him. First, I can remove the corruption and return you to your reality. Your memories of this place would fade like a dream, and you would continue your existence as the guardian of your Earth. But know that your reality, like all realities, faces its own version of chaos. Without the knowledge you have gained here, you may be unprepared when those forces manifest. The vision shifted. Second, I can heal you and allow you to remain in this reality as a free agent. Your power would serve as a bulwark against both chaos and the Kryptonian Collectorate, but your very existence outside Imperial hierarchy would destabilize the careful balance of faith and authority upon which mankind's survival depends. Civil wars would be fought in your name, cults would arise claiming your patronage, your intentions would be irrelevant against the tide of human belief. The final vision unfolded, grandest and most terrible of all. Third, I can remake you as my servant. Your power would be sanctified, your purpose aligned with the Imperium's survival. You would become a symbol of imperial might, a living saint whose very existence reinforces mankind's faith in their protector. Your freedom would be curtailed, your identity subsumed into the greater narrative of the Imperium, but your ability to save lives would be magnified 1,000-fold. The visions faded, leaving Kal-El once more aware of the immense chamber and the withered form upon the golden throne. The corruption in his wounds throbbed with increasing urgency. There must be another way, Kal-El thought, a compromise that preserves both my autonomy and this reality's stability. The luxury of perfect solutions died with old Earth, Kal-El. In this universe, all choices carry a blood price. All victories are partial. All defeats absolute. Kal-El considered each option carefully. Return to his reality without the knowledge to combat chaos when it inevitably manifested. Remain free but become an unwitting catalyst for civil war and religious strife. Or surrender his autonomy to serve the Emperor's vision, becoming a tool of an Imperium whose methods often contradicted everything he stood for. None were ideal. All required sacrifice. As he deliberated, he became aware of another presence within the Emperor's psychic projection. Not separate, but a facet of the whole. A lingering remnant of the man the Emperor had been before his internment upon the Golden Throne. This aspect watched Kal-El with something approaching compassion. This choice defines not merely your fate, Kal-El, but potentially the course of multiple realities. The Collectorate will not cease its pursuit. Chaos will not abandon its claim upon your soul. My Imperium cannot tolerate an unaligned power of your magnitude. There are no innocent options remaining to you. In that moment, with perfect clarity, Kal-El understood the weight the Emperor had carried for 10 millennia. The impossible choices, the necessary compromises, the sacrifices of principle in service to survival. If I choose to serve, he thought carefully, what guarantees do I have that my power won't be misused? That I won't be ordered to commit atrocities in the name of imperial security? Guarantees are for realities with the luxury of certainty, last son. I can offer only this. My vision for humanity has always been one of elevation, not mere survival. The cruelties of the Imperium are necessities I would unmake if circumstances allowed. Perhaps with your power added to mine, such reform becomes possible in time. It was not the reassurance Kal-El had hoped for, but it carried the ring of truth. The Emperor offered no false promises, no easy absolution. For the first time since arriving in this harsh reality, Kal-El truly understood its fundamental difference from his own. His Earth had been a place where individual heroism could change history, where moral compromise was rarely necessary, where light always eventually triumphed over darkness. This universe offered no such comforts. Here, the best intentions paved roads to damnation. Here, victory was measured not in lives saved, but in humanity's continued existence against forces that sought its utter annihilation. The corruption pulsed again. Time was running short. In the end, it came down to the fundamental question that had always guided him. How could he best serve life? I choose the third path, he communicated finally. Not because I agree with everything the Imperium stands for, but because I can do the most good within its structure rather than against it. The Emperor's presence seemed to expand, filling the vast chamber with golden light that penetrated to Kal-El's very core. So be it. Kneel as Kal-El, last son of Krypton, and rise as the Emperor's shield. Kal-El knelt before the golden throne, his head bowed. The Emperor's psychic power engulfed him, burning away the chaos corruption with cleansing fire that seared not just his flesh, but his very soul. The pain was beyond anything he had ever experienced, yet he did not cry out. With these final words, the Emperor's direct presence receded, though the connection remained, a golden thread linking Kal-El's consciousness to the master of mankind. The shield captain approached, inclining his head slightly in acknowledgement of Kal-El's new status. The audience is concluded. You will be escorted to the Sanctorum Imperialis for formal investiture and instruction in your duties. As Kal-El followed the custodes from the throne room, he felt the weight of his decisions settle upon him. He had sacrificed the possibility of returning to his own reality, committed himself to serving an empire whose methods he did not fully endorse, in hopes of guiding it toward a more compassionate future. In the vast Gothic corridors of the Imperial Palace, he caught sight of his reflection in a polished adamantium surface, the symbol of hope from Krypton, now incorporated into the Imperial Aquila, a compromise like everything in this universe, not perfect but perhaps necessary. In the Sanctorum Imperialis, surrounded by the greatest heroes and darkest secrets of the Imperium, Kal-El knelt once more as the High Lords of Terra proclaimed his new title before the assembled masses. "Behold," intoned the Master of the Administratum, his voice amplified to reach the countless thousands gathered in the processional. "The shield of the Emperor, sanctified son of Terra, protector of mankind." The masses chanted their devotion, their faith strengthening the Emperor's light throughout the Imperium. And in the shadows between stars, entities of immense malevolence turned their attention toward this new development, sensing both opportunity and threat in the last Kryptonian sanctification. The great game continued. The war eternal raged on, and Superman, once the bright champion of a more hopeful universe, took his place among the grim defenders of mankind's twilight empire, carrying the symbol of hope into a reality that had all but forgotten its meaning. But now, perhaps that symbol would burn brighter than ever before.